Salutations everybody, it is Matty here today. I hope you're all doing absolutely excellent. Today I'm bringing you my review for Doom: The Dark Ages. I played it here on PC, beat the game in about 15 hours or so, and I'm excited to talk about it because this is a game that I've been really looking forward to ever since it was announced, because the last game it produced in Doom Eternal I said was one of the best first-person shooters I had ever played, and that still holds up to this day. There's just that every now and again I get a little itch, I reinstall Doom Eternal, I fire it up and I go, man, this game is great. Now, Doom: The Dark Ages was saying a lot of things I really like to hear about Doom. In particular, was that Dark Ages was just about the campaign. It was embracing the single-player component of Doom. I enjoyed 2016's foray into multiplayer. It was classic and enjoyable, but I felt like addition by subtraction was the case here with Dark Ages after battle mode was a thing for Eternal. Not that battle mode was awful, it just felt like that time and energy could have been spent elsewhere. So since the campaigns for Doom have already ruled twice over, I had all the reason to believe that Dark Ages would knock it out of the park, and I think for the most part, they've done a really good job here. How I'd really define my experience with Doom: The Dark Ages is that I thought it was good, but I think for a lot of people, this is actually going to be the Doom you're looking for, as I'll break down here. I think this Doom is more in line with 2016's and is definitely more accessible, where if you felt like the sort of race car, fighter jet policies of Doom Eternal were a little too much, a little difficult to get into, I got smushed by that game, so I get it, then this game will be much more up your alley, and that may be music to your ears. However, if you are a Doom Eternal diehard like me, it's not that we wanted Eternal again. We could already tell from the first gameplay trailer, there were dragons and mechs and whatnot, that Doom: The Dark Ages was going to be very different, and it was very transparent, talking about monster trucks and being a tank and kind of barreling over your enemies, and that's the gameplay design here. But just because they achieved that design doesn't mean it's going to feel good, and I think for those of you who like those feelings you got from Eternal, you may be searching for why you might not feel the same in the case of Dark Ages. Again, good game, but it missed the greatness for me this time around, as I'll break down. If you're new here, you're into day one reviews, consider subscribing. I want to open up with the presentation. Easily one of my favorite parts of this game. This is just spectacle that is second to none. The way cutscenes are shot honestly reminded me of Bungie's era of Halo. In particular, some shots I think were very direct callbacks that I looked at and went, you know what? I can't wait for Halo fans to see some of those there. But also, it's a real testament to things like the lighting, the environmental detail. I mean, the artists responsible for working on these areas are worthy of so much praise. They did so much to achieve what I think is a brilliant world to explore. And the biggest difference here between Doom: The Dark Ages and Eternal is Eternal had these vistas, these overlooks where you went, man, the architecture, the lighting, the colors, everything's working together really well here to create this sweet visual palette. But a lot of it was not something you could explore or feel like you were in once you got into that building. In the case of Doom: The Dark Ages, many of these levels are broken wide open, and so the things you see, you do get to explore. And so the visuals are a big point of praise for me in this game, because also, like Eternal, there are these brief moments where the action slows down and you can really take it in. And sometimes I felt bad zooming by all of the detail. There's one shot, I won't spoil what, but in the final level I looked at and went, geez, man, like they are wicked talented when it comes to environment art, and it shows out again here with Dark Ages. I also think in a lot of ways this is the most badass the Doomslayer has been, not just because of the outfit or the dragons and the mechs he pilots, but it's just his entire demeanor. I think it really captures the anger that the Doomslayer has, just his demeanor, the way he's animated, the way he acts, the way he attacks in these cutscenes. It really just captures him super well. You can feel the character in him despite very little ever being said. Another bit of detail that they've really knocked it out of the park with here is gore. It really respects where you're shooting and what you're shooting with. I mean, there was one point where I was on a turret and I was just raining fire down on some giant demon, and I watched as the chunk of his thigh flew off and I could just literally see the bone underneath, and I went, oh, clearly that's just like deliberate, that's set up. But then I was doing it in combat with my guns and I was shooting different parts of their body and just watching chunks fly off, and it's a gross level of detail, but it really makes the shooting satisfying, and it is just awesome to saw through a lot of these enemies. And to kind of wrap up some thoughts on presentation, they do a really good job with pacing in this game. One of my critiques of Doom 2016 was that I feel like they kind of give you everything that you wanted to play with way too soon. And so the last few missions are spent with that toy box, and it's good game design, but I kind of like the carrot at the end of the stick in these Doom games. Eternal did that very well all the way up until the very end, and I think Doom the Dark Ages also does this very well, where they're always putting something kind of interesting or fun to mess around with when it comes to these levels in Doom the Dark Ages. So yeah, the spectacle and the pacing are really good. And when I open the video versus what I just said, you might have like a lot of questions, like how did we get here? Like, it sounds like you really liked it. Well, let's get a little bit into the history of the Doom franchise, because id Software has gone on record of how they view the movement, shooting, and combat across their games. In 2020, they defined Doom Eternal as a race car or a fighter jet, while 2025's Dark Ages is referred to as a monster truck or an iron tank. And then there's 2016, which after Eternal and Dark Ages is still great, but it definitely feels slow. But I do think this description of the monster truck is entirely accurate when it comes to Dark Ages. While you're still quite fast, I think faster than they actually sold it to you as, much of your time in Dark Ages is going to be spent barreling over your opponents. Perhaps a little too easily, and we'll get to that. But I mean, everything from just locking onto your opponent and just shield rushing gives you so much speed and momentum, but you also plow through like 8 enemies in that window too. Also attached to all of this messaging, though, has been the term stand and fight. The goal of id was to get closer to what traditional Doom was as you wade through projectiles rather than complex weapon swapping and the resource balancing that you found in Doom Eternal. Dark Ages is, as I said earlier, much closer to 2016's Doom, and I do think that'll be music to a lot of people's ears. However, Dark Ages' entire design as a game is much more flat, accessible, and easier, and there's no denying that Eternal was a tough, hardcore, high-skill game. You can make Dark Ages that way with plenty of difficulty tweaking, but I beat the game on the second highest difficulty, only dying about 5 times across the 22 total missions. And keep in mind, I need to make this very clear, this is not me doing a subtle flex. I'm not great at these games. Like, I definitely used to play a lot of first-person shooters and used to be very good at them, so there is some affinity for them, but like, Doom Eternal, I got waxed in a lot of times, especially those later missions. I was dying a lot on the standard difficulty. Doom the Dark Ages, even as I continue to tune it up and tune it to be more difficult, isn't nearly as merciless as what you get in Eternal. And again, for a lot of people, this is going to be great. And I didn't need it to be this hardcore challenge, but there is just too long didn't read something to be said here about just how easy this game really is. But the question is, why is it easier? And why does that affect your verdict if you can try to tune the difficulty a little bit to your liking? Well, it comes down to some of the core game design of standing and fighting, which at its heart is pairing. As you've already seen, I imagine, Doom the Dark Ages gives you a shield. It allows you to go full Captain America with a shotgun, though, and that is awesome. However, when you see a green attack pattern coming, you're going to hit the parry button, and even on the highest of difficulties, this window is extremely forgiving. Again, this actually may be music to a lot of people's ears. I've been saying that a lot this video, but that's the thing I'm trying to acknowledge here, is that while it may not fully be the Doom for me, it actually may be the Doom for you, which is why I'm not like, this is bad, man. Because I think of games like Expedition 33 or Sekiro, where it's like, yeah, I like the idea of pairing, but I'm not very good at it, or I'm getting older, my timing's not quite what it used to be. You don't really have to worry about that here really at all when it comes to Dark Ages. I found the window, even when it was fully tuned down, to just be extremely forgiving, extremely open. And that's because basically every enemy in this game is going to be slinging green fire attacks at you or green laser attacks at you that you'll be parrying like a madman, to the point where you will sometimes stun lock yourself because of how much you have parried back to back to back to back. It's a lot of parrying. Part of the reason, to my original point, that Doom the Dark Ages is so easy is because despite how many new enemy types they throw at you, and to be clear, there's a lot of enemies, they rarely actually feel varied in how you approach them and how they attack you and how you defend yourself from them, where your game plan is going to alter. You will always parry every enemy in the game. Any common demon, any boss, yes, even the final boss, which was extremely underwhelming, might I add, anyone. It is flat across the entirety of the campaign. So with seldom new attack patterns and the same response from me, which is just timing a very, very accessible parry button, no single enemy threw me anything that forced me to evolve my pattern. And by the 6th chapter in the game, I was in cruise control. And by the end of the game, while I was entertained, it's just a fun shooter at the end of the day, my eyes had kind of glazed over as the model had more than worn out its welcome with little to really evolve it. And perhaps what made me feel sad is when I realized why that was the case. And it was because I feel the weapon wheel wasn't as embraced with the enemy design here. So if you've played Eternal, I'm going to remind you of some things, but if you haven't, basically Doom Eternal allowed you to swap to different weapons that would allow you to exploit certain enemy weaknesses or have different physical traits on these enemies that if you targeted would make your life less of a living hell. So small example, the Kako Demon floating around, you take out the shotgun, the alternate attack shoots a grenade in their mouth. This is a quick way to put them in a state where you can finish them off with a glory kill. Or there were those robotic demons with spider tails that shot lasers at you. If you shot the laser tail, that would completely incapacitate them and allow you to take them out a little bit easier. And there were certain weapons that shredded through that easier than others, so you'd be swapping to that. Or another example are the pinkies. They'd run at you, and it didn't matter what weapon you had to shoot them from behind. So it changed how you navigated all these combat scenarios when they threw all three of these at you at once. All those levels of engagement are gone from Doom the Dark Ages in exchange for what I call a much more flat level of accessibility and approach to the combat. So instead of embracing weapon exposing weaknesses, Doom the Dark Ages opts for an armor system on their enemies that requires you to lay on firepower of any choosing before you bounce your shield off of them and break said armor. But don't get that too confused with like spongy enemies. I think the actual enemy health was balanced really well, but again, it just means you kind of approach Doom the Dark Ages enemies the same as from start to finish. The other element that they embrace until the very end with its combat are what are called morale fights. So these battles, you'll see a health bar and a shield bar at the top of the screen. The leader of these enemies is literally invincible until you kill everyone around them. So as you kill everyone, you're going to see this blue meter beneath the health bar lower. And I do think this is a totally fine system because it's fun at first. You navigate these combat arenas and you're basically avoiding these enemies like the plague and trying to make sure you take everyone else out around them. But they do it like constantly, and they do it to a point where even by the final mission, I'm like, oh my God, again? Like there's nothing new here. And I think it does speak a little bit to some of the plain mission design in the game. Like it's usually getting 2 or 3 keys, and Doom 2016 and Eternal were very straightforward as well in their mission design too. So again, that's fine with me, but it's why, as I'm trying to unpack for you all here, the enemy design and the variety are clearly the key elements for me that I found to be missing in certain components of Dark Ages, which did take it from that gray area down to the good area. The thing Dark Ages tries to do in a self-aware move to provide variety are the dragons and the mech fights. Now, back to what I talked about with spectacle and presentation, absolutely epic and awe-inspiring. There is that feeling of power when you are just flying your dragon through some of these areas and dogfighting with other demon ships. It's really cool. But the heart of the dragon missions is always going to be locking on in these kind of weird dodging mini games as you take out these shielded parts of the ship. And very similar to the parry system of the combat on the ground, the dragon combat embraces that a lot as well. So no like special moves or any takedowns or anything like that. Instead, it's just locking on to parts of a ship, and when they start shooting at you, you dodge in a particular direction, and that supercharges your attacks, and then you take out that part of the ship a little bit quicker, and you rinse and repeat that until the ship lands, and then you land on the ship and go on foot. And so it just, I don't know, it just, again, feels like it's flat, right? And by flat, I don't mean like literally my emotions are flat, but the design of the game, even down to the dragons, was flat. In the mechs, it's very cool, and I think they balanced the timing of the mechs much better because you spend less time in them, and they're usually there to punctuate big story moments, but it also does come down to dodging, which is the same as the parry system, and the windows for both the dodging in the dragon and the mech are more forgiving than the parrying when your gun's out. So if I'm already talking about a very forgiving window, can you imagine what it's like for dodging in the mech? It's insane, but it's a lot of hand-to-hand combat. Again, very cool presentation. The sound design is incredible as you're like punching through these enemies and you hear like, I gotta know what the sound design team at id was doing to make these sorts of crazy, like crunchy, gooey, squishy, nasty sounds as you're like literally punching metal on bone and flesh and just knocking off pieces of their body with it. It's very cool, very empowering, very Transformers even, or kind of like a Megazord in Power Rangers. It's awesome. Again, just what a cool game to be able to say, like, you're basically Captain America with a shotgun, you can ride a dragon and get in a mech. I just wish, at least in these instances, the mechanics of how you approach these enemies, again, on a defensive option, is just a little touch different, because, again, it does rob a lot of the joy that I think it could provide if different mechanics or enemies were embraced in an interesting way. But it's really just parrying and an armor system. The combat economy has been varied up a little bit in Doom the Dark Ages as well. Part of the design goal, for those who don't know, with Dark Ages was to bring it more in line with OG Doom, like Doom 1, Doom 2, 64, those types of games. And I think they've really succeeded with that, because this is a more pickup-oriented game. Instead of using your chainsaw for ammo or to get some armor back, you'll use the fire belch, or some glory kills will get you some health back. Doom the Dark Ages is like, hey, you kill an enemy, they're going to pop some health out. You want to pop the armor on a bunch of guys holding shields, that's going to give you some armor back. Or most of the time, you're going to be running around looking for pickups as you would back in those older Doom games. I think this works. I think it's fun. I think it's arcadey. I think it speaks to the heritage of the series. It does, again, lower that complexity a bit, but I think here's where it connects well with the design. If you're going for more of that old school Doom vibe, making it based more around pickups, more boomer shooter-like, was a good choice. And I did enjoy that a bit, even if it, again, sacrificed some of the complexity of the enemy design. At least here, it made more sense to me. What didn't really make sense to me, though, is no glory kills. So I read up about this because I was like, why did they remove this? This was like a staple since 2016 when they reintroduced it. This has been the id Software flavor, and they described in an interview that this was done to keep your momentum in combat by tying it to the game's melee system. So you'll get multiple melee weapons in Doom the Dark Ages, from your fist to a flail to something else I won't spoil for you. That's pretty cool. And the idea was that this would just keep you moving, keep you going. And I personally never really felt this way. I don't feel like their reasoning was justified upon completion of the game, because I still was attacking enemies until I saw part of their body highlighted. Now it's like in a more maroon color. I would then press the melee button. There would be an animation that would occur that would allow me to like chop off their arm or take them out. But instead it just looked worse. Not as epic is the best way to describe it, where it's just a boot for everyone. You just see the Doom guy's foot just come out and pop, just kicks him right on their butt. That was really it. So I don't feel like the removal of glory kills was justified here. If it did maintain that momentum, I think that would be totally fine with me at the end of the day, because there is a fair argument to be made that glory kills are these glorified QTE events, and while I think they're epic, I understand where people are coming from with that. So it's not just like me sitting here going, man, I wish there was just like these gore finishers. I want more of that. It's just like, if the trade-off was to give you more momentum, I don't feel like I saw that here. And I just think it would have been better off bringing the glory kills back, because it didn't feel like the timing was different really at all. One thing that does improve the stand and fight gameplay design is how shield runes come into play. This is much later in the game, but basically these are going to be defensive options that proc, if that's the best term to use, as you defend against particular types of attacks. Like, there's an auto turret you can get that if you deflect a projectile that you can parry coming your way, a turret will come out, and this thing, like, the game was already easy, but oh my gosh, with this thing, it just mows down enemies for you. It's insane how easy it is, but it does give you offensive options on defense. And I think one of the better choices that they could have made with this game was giving you that a little bit earlier, because stand and fight sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, not even sometimes, oftentimes, stun locks you where you're stopping shooting and moving in a Doom game. And it's a different feel for sure. Again, one that I think a lot of people get down with, but for me, it felt more interruptive. Another thing they evolved from Eternal that I actually did like here is the upgrade system. So you can upgrade your guns, you can upgrade your shield, you can upgrade your melee weapons, and I think some of the upgrades they do add in here are really cool. Speaking about Halo inspiration, they have a weapon called the Shredder, which literally shoots spikes into your enemies, and then there is an upgrade you can get that basically turns it into the Needler, where as you load them with shots from the Shredder, they'll change a color, and if you throw your shield at them, it'll literally blow up and the spikes will go out and hit other enemies nearby. Again, reminded me exactly of the Needler from Halo, where you load them with the needles, and if they're all in there, it creates an explosion. It was just a really cool weapon upgrade there. My favorite was the Cycler, which basically turned into this like Ratchet and Clank chain lightning-esque weapon where one kill just started to chain to one to the other, and the sound effects as they explode with electricity was really good. There are 2 classes for each type of weapon, and you'll eventually cozy up to your favorite, which I think was also a pretty fun change to make. It was different, definitely, from Eternal, but I think in a good way. Where Eternal made you get comfortable with everything, Doom the Dark Ages does let you just cozy up with your favorite weapon. Like, that Cycler, that thing was on repeat for like the entire second half of the playthrough, and I was totally content with it. So there are some positive elements that come from the stand and fight game design. Overall, I don't think it's as good as Eternal, but still an entertaining time. It's just that I think if you're an Eternal diehard, I hope I articulated well here where I think you might trip up a little bit. Last thing I'm going to get into, which is kind of weird to say, but last thing I'm going to get into is the story. I know, feel free to wave this one away, but I get if you don't give a damn, but it looks like it actually gave a damn with this, and I think they've always cared. If you look at their codex in 2016 or Eternal, there was a level of like, we have lore and we care about it. We want to retain it. We want to make sure you know what is canon. But Doom the Dark Ages has like a serious dedication to its story, and its missions are all interconnected. Like one after the other connects to the other, and the cutscenes are sort of the conduit between these. And there's a lot of characters speaking during missions because, as I mentioned earlier, there's a sense of openness instead of linearity, like something in Doom Eternal. And so as you're roaming these areas, you'll hear a little bit of chatter over the comms. Not so much that it's distracting. The game is very self-aware. Like, you'll finish an objective and they get one line. That's all they get many times. Just one line. But that sense of openness does open up kind of moments of conversation or talking or filling in some of the gaps to what is happening in the story, or like why you're doing what you're doing. So again, there is a whole new set of attention on the production values of the story here that I feel like, yeah, it's not just brief snippets, and I should talk about it. So the story of Doom the Dark Ages is set before Doom 2016. It focuses on a war between the Sentinels and the demons of hell. And if there's any way I can describe this story, because I don't have anything to say about any of its like characters or whatever, it's very Evil Within. Like Evil Within is such an acid trip, and it's somewhere in the area of like, I think I know what's going on here, but also I don't know what the hell's going on here. I'm just kind of enjoying the ride. And I think Doom the Dark Ages, especially the last chunk of its story, is really in that crazy pocket. So the campaign for many people is just going to be this vehicle that gets you from crazy location to crazy location, mission to mission. But given the amount of characters, their supposed importance, the stakes of this war, how a lot of this is the origins of the Doomslayer leading into 2016, I kind of thought the story would be told better. You're not going to get like a BJ Blazkowicz moment like you did with Wolfenstein when it first came back through Machine Games. You're like, wait, I care about BJ now? What's going on here? I wasn't expecting that by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think Doom the Dark Ages, for a about 15-hour campaign that they called their biggest Doom game yet, did miss an opportunity to bring people in with a little bit more of a tighter, cohesive narrative that didn't just serve as a what I call a mission conduit. So accompanying this story is a soundtrack not composed by Mick Gordon, and sadly you can tell, you know, this is a step down in my opinion. It is still Doom feeling, but by I'd say the midpoint in the game, all the tracks kind of blend together and sound very similar, and there aren't these really standout exclamation point moments where you're like, oh, this is a big battle. You never really get that vibe in my experience. And so there you have it, Doom the Dark Ages. I think it's a really good game in a lot of areas, and a lot of my problems I recognize aren't going to be your problems. I think for a lot of people out there who are Eternal diehards, you might want to tread a little carefully here. But if what I said sounds really good to you, then this isn't something that you should hesitate to pick up. I mean, the PC optimization in my experience was fantastic. This ran buttery smooth. I played it on Ultra, did not have a single hiccup in frame rate, like just a perfect experience on a technical level. I also didn't encounter any bugs. Like, it's really well polished. Like, they've done a really good job putting this game together. I just wish I liked the game design a little bit more, but it's not like it's bad or anything, so I don't want anyone to get that idea. Just a game that I wish I could love a little bit more, but still happy I spent some time with it. I was entertained, but I know after Eternal that there's more from id to give me than just I was entertained. So there are my thoughts on Doom the Dark Ages. I'm looking forward to getting yours down below. Fire away. Other than that, take excellent care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next video. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.